So, this video is a review of mixed trig. So we've been doing right triangle trig, sine, cosine, and tangent. Um, there's one really important question when you're looking at the worksheet for today and when you're doing any kind of trig problems in the future. How do I know which one to pick? How do you know when to use sine, when to use cosine, or when to use tangent? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about very briefly today. It shouldn't take very long at all. So, as always, the very first thing you want to do when you are doing a trig problem is take a second, look at what angle you're dealing with, and identify what is opposite, what is adjacent, and what is the hypotenuse. Okay, so looking over here at our triangle, just as we've done in all of the previous lessons, if this is our angle x, we know that the hypotenuse is going to be across from the right angle as always. We know that across from this angle is going to be the opposite, the OPP. And then the other side right here next to our angle is the adjacent. Okay, so once we've done that, what you need to do is remember all three of the trig functions. You need to remember sine, cosine, and tangent. So, if you recall, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So, SOH, or some old horse. Cosine, C-A-H, is adjacent over hypotenuse. Caught another horse. And tangent, TOA, is opposite over adjacent, taking oats away. I know there's another way to remember that. It's a little more inappropriate. If that's what you know, then that's what you know. The important thing is that you remember all three of them. You remember sine, you remember cosine, and you remember tangent. All three of them are very important because when you're looking at these problems, some of them only give you two sides. Some of them only give you two sides. So I'll give you a second to copy this. And we'll move on to step number 3. Which function as in sine, cosine, or tangent can you use to solve the problem? That's what you need to ask yourself when you're looking at any one of these problems here. Okay, so you need to understand that when they only give you two, you have to label them opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse, and figure out what you're going to use. So in this case, looking at our 45-degree angle right down here, they give us the opposite and they give us the adjacent. If they give you OPP and ADJ, opposite and adjacent, the trig function that uses that, is tangent right here. The trig function that uses opposite and adjacent is tangent. So if you see opposite and adjacent, you want to use tan. Very similarly, looking at the next one, we have our angle right down here. This one gives us the opposite, but this time it's not the adjacent side, it's the hypotenuse, the HYP. So if they give you opposite and hypotenuse, you're going to use the thing that has OH in it is sine, so you're going to use sine. And the last one over here, our angle, they give us the side right next to it, which is adjacent. And again, they give us the hypotenuse. So if they give you adjacent and hypotenuse, you want to use cosine, because that is CAH. Cosine is adjacent and hypotenuse. So really the only different thing is you have to figure out, am I going to use sine? Am I going to use cosine? Or am I going to use tangent? Which one is it going to be? To do that, you have to look at what pieces of the puzzle they've given you. Okay, I'll give you a second to copy that down. if you haven't already. All right, and we're going to do a couple of examples here. So, the first example, they give us a triangle and they want us to find x. Okay, so the very first thing you do every single time is you look at your angle and you're going to label it. So this one, if we draw our arrow in here, if you go across is our opposite. The right angle tells us that this is the hypotenuse and our other side is the adjacent. And even though we're not using the adjacent, it's still a good idea to label it anyways. It's a really bad A, but that's okay, you get the idea. So we have to ask ourselves, which trig function uses opposite and hypotenuse? It's going to be sine. So sine, we need our angle, which in this case is x. So sine of x equals, and now we need opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite is 9 over hypotenuse is 10. So 9 over 10. Sine of x is 9 over 10. Can we put this in our calculator? Could we find that on a trig table? The answer is no. You cannot find a trig value if there's a variable here. It has to be a number. So you have to do something else. You have to use inverse sine or arc sine. So we'll do arc sine of this side, and we will do arc sine of this side. Arc sine and sine cancel out. We're left with just x equals, and if you plug arc sine of 9 over 10 into your calculator, you get something like 64.2. And that is your answer. Okay, if you didn't copy that down already, I'll give you a second to do it right now. All right, this second example is going to be very similar. I'm actually going to ask the teacher to pause this now so that you can have a second to do it on your own. If you could pause it and take about 2 minutes to try this on your own, and then I will explain it. All right, so the very first thing you should have done when you looked at this is go ahead and look at your angle here and label your sides. So if we draw our arrow, this is our opposite. We know that our right angle tells us our hypotenuse is over here, and our adjacent is right over here. So we have opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. This time, we've been given opposite and adjacent. So the trig function that uses opposite and adjacent is tangent. So tan of our angle, which is y, equals opposite, which is 16, over adjacent, which is 5. So tan of y equals 16 over 5. Once again, when you are looking at this, can you put tan y in your calculator? Again, the answer is no. You cannot put that in your calculator. So you have to do something else. We're going to use arctan of both sides. So arctan of that side and arctan of this side. We'll do the same thing. The tan inverse and the tangent cancel out. We're left with just y. You should plug tan negative 1 of 16 over 5 into your calculator, and you should get back something like 72.6. If for some reason you did not get that, or you did not get the last problem, check to make sure that your calculator is in degrees and not in radians. Do that by pushing the mode button, going down a couple and over to make sure degrees is highlighted. Okay, one more example. Give you a second to do that. All right, the last example here is a little different. We're going to go ahead and do it together. So, as always, first thing you do, looking at our angle right here, put an arrow across, and that tells us where the opposite is. The right angle tells us where the hypotenuse is, and that means that this other side here has to be adjacent. Okay, and they're asking us to find z. You'll notice this time z isn't the angle. Z is one of the sides. So we have to figure out. They gave us the hypotenuse, and they're asking about the adjacent here. So which trig function uses adjacent and hypotenuse? Well, if you look back to the very beginning of this, you will know that cosine uses adjacent and hypotenuse. So we want to do cosine of our angle. Our angle happens to be 36 this time. And we know that our adjacent is z. And our hypotenuse is 25. So cosine of 36 equals z over 25. Now you want to ask yourself again, can I put this in my calculator? Can I put cosine 36 in my calculator? The answer this time is yes. When you do that, you get something like 0.8090. And that's still going to be equal to z over 25. Okay? If you recall, this is set up just like a proportion. So we want to put this over 1. And then we want to go ahead and cross multiply. So we're going to do this and this. And you should end up with something like z equals 20.2. Okay? When you multiply 0.8090 times 25, you end up with 20.2. I'll give you a second to copy that down. All right. For class work and for homework, there's 3 different parts to this. It's not that much. Don't complain. Don't whine. The first part, you are going to do 1 through 20 all. You're going to do 1 through 20, all of them. You do not have to solve these. It's just writing the fraction. So what tan of z is, what sine of z is, what cosine of a is. You're just writing down a fraction. That's it. The next part, 21 through 40, you're going to do the odd problems, 21, 23, 25, 27, and so on. Those you actually do have to solve. Okay? You have to use a calculator to do that. If you're doing it for homework, I understand that you can only get it to the part where you have to plug it in because most of you do not have calculators that have trig on them. That's fine. We have that understanding. It's fine. And the last part here is 41 through 60 evens. This is going to be collected at the end of class on Monday. So you will have some time to work on it Monday. However, you may also need to plug this part into the calculator on Monday, so that might be where your time is spent. So if you're going to have to use a calculator, you should do some of this also to make sure you have the whole thing done, because this whole assignment is going to be collected on Monday at the end of class. Okay? So you have 1 through 20 doing all of them, just writing the fractions. 21 through 40, the odds, you actually do have to solve them. And 41 through 60 evens is going to be collected at the end of class on Monday. Alrighty. Have a great rest of your day.